ॐ स्थापकाय च धर्मस्य सर्वधर्मस्वरूपिणे अवतारवरिष्ठाय रामकृष्णाय ते नमः. O Ramakrishna, the establisher of the eternal religion, the embodiment of all religions, and the best of all incarnations, we salute thee. In the last reading class, we left at page 485. We were reading about an incident where a few ladies had gone to Sri Ramakrishna with great difficulty. So they were in a conversation with him. At that time, some other visitor came to visit Sri Ramakrishna. There was an embarrassing situation. It was a small room where 4 or 5 ladies and the gentleman could not be accommodated. So the 2 of them had some place to sit away from Sri Ramakrishna, making place for the new visitor. But the other 3, they had no place to go. Therefore, they went under the cot of Sri Ramakrishna and had to be there hiding themselves, leaving that whole space for the fat visitor to sit for full 1 hour. So that incident, we had gone through half of it. We will go through the rest of it today. We reached it with great difficulty. We were not even acquainted with the teacher's family. Entering the house, we saw on a small wooden cot a small room. There was no one near him. As soon as he saw us, he laughed and said affectionately, "Ah, how could you come here?" We saluted him and told him the whole story. He was very happy and asked us to sit in the room and began to talk on various subjects. And they go on explaining the story. Then why all women looking down? So people used to say that Sri Ramakrishna would not entertain women. So these ladies tell us, no, it was wrong. Ah, how could you come here? He asked. He says, we saluted him. Everyone now says he did not allow women to touch him or even to approach him. We laugh to hear and think we are not dead yet. We are here to say that it was wrong. What people say is wrong. He dearly entertained us also, just as he would the menfolk. Who will know how kind he was? He had the same attitude towards men and women. But it is true that if women stayed near him long, he would say, "Please go now and pay reverence to the presiding deities of the temples." We have heard him ask menfolk also like that. However, that may be, we were sitting and speaking with him. Those 2 of us who were elderly sat very near the door, and the rest, the 3 of us, in a corner within the room. When Pranakrishna Mukhopadhyaya, whom the master called the fat Brahmin, came quite unexpectedly. Should we have gone out? That was the usual thing that ladies would do. If somebody comes, if they would not sit in front of the stranger, they would all clear out from the room. But here there was no place to go out also, except the street. So they could not go and stand in the street. No, there was no possibility of that. Where had we to go? There was a window near the door. The 2 elderly ones took their seats there. And the rest, the 3 of us together, made our way under the cot on which the master was sitting and lay there. Each one of us had her whole body swollen on account of mosquito bites. What could we do? There was no possibility of movement. We were lying still. The Brahmin talked for about an hour with the master and left. We then came out laughing. You see, they laughing after so much of harassment by the mosquitoes and trouble they suffered. The master was then taken to the inner apartment for light refreshments. We accompanied him there. The master afterwards got into the carriage to go to Dakshineshwar. We all then walked back home. It was about 9 p.m. The master bestowed equal grace on women. The next day we went to Dakshineshwar again. As soon as we were there, the master came near and said, I took almost all your sweets. There is only a little left over. There was no illness or anything of the kind. Only the stomach was just a little heavy. I was surprised to be told so. Nothing suited his delicate stomach, and to think he had taken a whole piece of sour, that sweet they had left on the previous day with Ramlal. So it was very, very heavy stuff, but he had taken almost the whole of it and digested. Then I heard that he took it while in the state of divine semi-consciousness. I was told that the master had taken his food at the house of the teacher and came to Dakshineshwar at 10:30 p.m. in the night. Shortly after his arrival, he got into ecstasy and said to Ramlal, I am very hungry, give me whatever there is in the room. Told so, Brother Ramlal brought the piece of shor and placed it before the master. When he ate up almost the whole of it, then we remembered that we had heard from the Holy Mother and Sister Lakshmi of his taking abnormal quantities of food, sometimes in the ecstatic mood, and digesting them. So much was the grace we had from him. It cannot be expressed in words what that compassion was and what attraction. Even we ourselves do not know or understand how we all used to go to him and do all those things. Why we cannot now go in that manner on foot anywhere to unknown people's houses without informing anybody, to see a holy man or listen to words on spirituality. Such things have vanished with him, by whose power we acted that way. We do not know why we still live through, though we have lost him. Sri Ramakrishna was a holy person of an extraordinary kind. He was an avatar Purusha, unequaled. So, the experience with him was altogether different than the experience with any other holy man. That's what these ladies are recounting. Many similar examples can be given. Those who never went out of their houses were asked to go and make purchases in the market, and also to beg from door to door in order that their pride and egotism might vanish. They were taken by the master to the religious fair of Panihati and brought back after they had witnessed it, and they also did all these and more unhesitatingly and with great delight. It does not seem to be a small matter when we think deeply over it. The ideas which arise in the minds of all from the knowledge of difference of rank, sex, etc., and which restrain one's behavior, had been for the time being washed away by the waves of spiritual consciousness. Every one saw the perfect ideal of his or her own spiritual mood in the Master, who was an embodiment of different divine moods. Men bowed down their heads to the perfect manifestation of manliness in him, and women found in him the fullest manifestation of all the noble womanly qualities, regarded him as dearer than the dearest, and they cast away all hesitation in moving with him. This is an extraordinary statement the author is telling. Among men he was the bravest of men, hero. Among women he was the heroine. Both were there in him, in equal share. Extraordinary thing. Even to imagine is difficult, but he was actually there. The Master mimic the gestures of women. The master would now and then mimic the gestures and postures of women, much to our merriment. The author says, they were all youngsters of 18, 19. These young boys should be entertained. Sri Ramakrishna himself used to say, they have come to me. I cannot give them only philosophy and dry things. I must entertain them also. So he would gesture like the women. We were surprised to find his mimicry so exact. On one occasion, a woman devotee said to us in this connection, one day the master began to show in our presence the gestures which women make when they see men. That pulling of the veil, pushing back of the tresses near the ear, pulling on the cloth over the breast, speaking various unnecessary and meaningless words. The imitation was perfectly accurate. Women are reporting about this. We saw it and began to laugh, but we felt shame and pain, thinking that the master was thus looking upon women, looking down upon women. We thought, why are all women like that? After all, we were women. We would naturally feel pain if anybody caricatured women like that. The master immediately understood and said affectionately, well, I don't mean you. You are not of the demoniac nature. It is women of that nature only who behave that way. So he consoles them that I am not caricaturing. I am showing a group of women who are born with such qualities. So it is true. They are there, so I am caricaturing. I am showing them through my mimicry. The moods of both men and women coexisted in the master. Every one of the devotees of the master has more or less seen the coexistence in him of the moods of both men and women. Girish had an experience of this nature one day and took the liberty of asking the master, Sir, are you a man or a woman? Girish was himself a master actor on the stage. So he asked, so you act the role of women, you act the role of men perfectly. Are you a man or a woman? His own disciple, Girish Chandra Ghosh. So Sri Ramakrishna, the master laughed and said in answer, I do not know. I do not know whether I am a man or a woman. Who would now decide in which sense the master made that remark? Whether in the sense of a man of self-knowledge, who means he is neither male nor female, or in the sense that he found in himself a harmony or blending of both. Sri Ramakrishna would have said it that I am a soul, soul has no sex. Or he might be referring to some extraordinary achievement of him. Even in the physical body, he felt that he was neither man nor woman. It was divinized. His physical body itself was divinized, where there was no question of sex, whether he meant that. The master could understand the moods of all because he lived in the state of bhavamukha, the threshold of the manifested world and the unmanifested God. So the manifested God is the world, is the creation, and unmanifested God is the Brahman, whom one sees in Samadhi. The threshold of it is called bhavamukha. So the master, he could understand everything because he was the threshold. He knew everything about the heavenly beings, he knew everything about the worldly beings also. Dwelling in bhavamukha, that is the threshold, the master became an embodiment of all moods and would thus exactly know all the mental states of all men and women, appearing to either as one of their own sex. He has himself expressed this to some of us. A highly devoted woman devotee, that is the mother of Swami Premananda, another disciple of him, told us that the master said to her one day, I know the nature of a man by a mere look I know who is good and who is bad, who is of noble descent, who is not, who is a man of knowledge and who is one of devotion, who will realize God and who will not. All these things I know, but I do not speak it out lest they should feel pain. As he was all along dwelling in Bhavamukha, the whole of the universe always, nay, every moment, appeared to him to be composed of nothing but ideas. He felt as if all things, men and women, cows and horses, wood and earth, etc., were rising and merging as different aggregates of ideas in the universal mind. And through those coverings of ideas, the infinite, indivisible ether of existence knowledge, existence consciousness was manifesting itself in varying degrees. Here less, there more. And in some other places, the veils were so dense that it appeared to be non-existent. So he refers to the mind of Sri Ramakrishna for a universal mind in which all persons, all things, etc., they are only the ideas. So in the mind, the several ideas come. For example, we see dream, hundreds and hundreds of beings we see in the dream. It is all belongs to the one mind that is ours. It is my mind that is manifesting itself as thousands of beings. The animate and that which is without life, and great people, small people, everything. It belongs to only one mind. Like that, Sri Ramakrishna saw the whole creation. The whole creation are the thought waves in the mind of God. And Sri Ramakrishna is one with God. That was the idea. He used to see everybody, everything as the waves in his mind. Again, the Master, the Immaculate Son of the Blissful Mother of the Universe, often started to merge in her for good, realizing through Samadhi the bodiless state of absolute bliss after the voluntary offering of everything belonging to him, the body, mind, mental functions, and all at her lotus feet. But reaching there, he came to know that the Divine Mother willed otherwise. So Sri Ramakrishna would merge into God. But then God himself, the Supreme Brahman, he does not want him to just come away from the world to which place he has come to do something. He established a new religion, give the new path to the whole humanity. So the mother did willed otherwise. In complete obedience to her command, he forcibly covered his mind, which had not got fully merged in the indescribable state, devoid of duality and non-duality, with the veil of Vidya Maya, the force tending Godward, and engaged himself in carrying out her behest. So he would come down again to the earth at the behest of the Supreme Brahman, whom he calls as Mother. So he wanted to merge in Mother and disappear once and for all. But Mother asked him, no, you have to go to the world and there is much things have to be done. You have to show the path, a new religion, new harmony between all the religions, the divinity of man. People should learn from you. Service to man is service to his worship of God. They must learn from you. Worship of women as the Shakti of God himself. So all these great things are to be preached, and by your own precept, you must guide the people. So go. So Mother asks him to come back, and he obeys her. The Universal Mother, the embodiment of infinite power, on her part became pleased with the Master. And although she kept him encased in a body, she always kept his mind keyed at such a pitch, a high state of oneness, that all ideas rising in the infinite universal mind were always felt to be his own from there, and were so under much under his control, that whoever saw him felt that the mother was the son and the son was the mother. Both were consciousness. The abode is consciousness, the name is consciousness, and the Lord is consciousness. So he felt that everything was God alone. So all the creation which we see as animate, inanimate, etc., with differences, he saw only a ocean of consciousness, consciousness of God. We have said as much as we could. Now, reader, think and feel who this master, the embodiment of infinite mood, is. So the author closes the chapter, then we come to the next chapter. Chapter 2, a few words on bhava, samadhi and darshana, the spiritual moods, profound meditations and spiritual visions. One quotation from Bhagavad Gita is given: listen again to my supreme word, the profoundest, you are dear to me, therefore I will tell you what is good for you. It will be not an exaggeration to say that before the master became well known, the people of Calcutta, both educated and uneducated, were completely ignorant about bhava, samadhi, or the extraordinary visions and the experiences of the realm of spirituality. The uneducated masses had a fantastic conception about these, owing to fear and awe, and the modern educated community allowed themselves to be carried away by the current of foreign education, completely devoid of the religious background, and looked upon this kind of vision, ecstasy, etc., as impossible or as derangement of the brain. So both of them misunderstood. Common people, they were afraid to go to a highly religious man. Oh, God himself is manifesting him in the high states of samadhi. Now then he goes, he dies. When he would go into samadhi, people would think he dies. He would come back to life. So they were afraid about the person of that type. And the educated people, they pooh-poohed. It is all simply show. It is nothing in there. It is a derangement of the brain. So there was misunderstanding of every kind from everybody. The bodily changes due to ecstasy belonging to the domain of spirituality appeared in the eyes to be a fainting fit. So when Sri Ramakrishna would lose his balance on the body in ecstasy, people would support him. So these people would say, it is a fainting fit. So it is not a spiritual phenomenon, it is just sort of a nervous debility. That's how the modern educated persons looked at it. Or a peculiar disease, some sort of a fix. Although conditions have changed to a great extent, very few people are even now really able to understand the inner meaning of bhava and samadhi. Yes, again, it is necessary to have a fair knowledge of the nature of samadhi in order to understand, even to a very small extent, the state of bhava-mukha, in which Sri Ramakrishna was always dwelling. Hence, we shall now try to explain a little of these to the reader. So the author is going to tell us about the samadhi. So the bhava, samadhi and the darshana. What the people in general do not experience is called by us an abnormal state. But the subtle experience of the spiritual world can never be object of knowledge for the ordinary human mind. Such experiences require instruction, training, constant practice, etc. The extraordinary visions and the experiences make the spiritual aspirant pure and gradually make him fit for realizing eternal peace by filling him every day with new vigor and ideas. Is it then reasonable to call these visions, experiences, etc. abnormal? Everyone has to admit the fact that all abnormalities without exception make men weak and bring about a deterioration in their intellectual and other powers. As the effect of these visions and experiences of the spiritual world is quite the opposite of deterioration, it must be admitted that the cause of all this is also opposite, and therefore these cannot be called diseases or derangements of the brain. So the author says samadhi is a state where you lose consciousness. You are in a state where practically you are unconscious of your own body, your mind. So it can be called as disease also. People lose consciousness due to nervous diseases or other diseases or other failure of different parts, maybe failure of some cells in the brain. So how do you distinguish? So here the author says, any other disease, whatever kind it is, so it makes you weaker. Every time that disease appears and you suffer, and after that suffering, you find that you are weaker than what you were earlier. Whereas here, anybody goes into samadhi, it comes back. He comes with double power, double freshness, and double new ideas, new fresh ideas. The results are wonderful, exactly the opposite of the disease. Therefore, the author says these two are two very different. Disease and unconsciousness, due to that, is altogether different from this sort of seemingly unconscious state of divine ecstasy called samadhi. Samadhi is different from the other unconscious states we see in the neurological cases or in other mental cases. It is by samadhi alone that one attains spirituality and eternal peace. It is through these visions, etc., that special spiritual experiences have always been gained. But a man cannot be fit to realize the eternal peace till he reaches the nirvikalpa state through the cessation of all mental modifications, and the non-dual state of consciousness becomes natural to him. As an example of this, Sri Ramakrishna used to say, when a thorn runs into the body, one has to take it out by means of another, then throw away both. Forgetting the divine Lord, man has come into this abnormality, the world. The abnormalities of sight, taste, etc. gradually get attenuated by those visions and experiences, which ultimately lead man to the knowledge of non-duality. He then feels blessed by knowing the truth of the Rishi's utterances. He is verily bliss itself. This is the process. All the doctrines, experiences, visions, etc. of the spiritual world, without exception, help man to go forward towards that goal. Swami Vivekananda often said that these visions, experiences, etc., indicated how far the aspirant has gone forward towards the goal. He called them the milestones on the way to progress. Therefore, let not the reader think that when there is a little intensity of a particular spiritual mood, or there is seen the vision of the forms of one or two deities through meditation, spiritual realization has reached its culmination. In that case, he will fall into a great error. Falling to this kind of error in the religious world, aspirants miss the goal, have only one idea, and are filled with hatred and animosity towards one another. If a man makes this error in cultivating devotion to God, he becomes fanatical and bigoted. It is this defect that is a great thorn in the path of devotion, and it arises out of the mean, narrow mind. So the spiritual experiences, unless you go to the climax and experience the highest samadhi state, it is possible that we have one-sided view of God, and we go on insisting that everybody should have only this one-sided view, and that is how fanaticism survives and thrives. So fanatical people always hate one another and lead to a lot of strifes and troubles and sort of a bitter feelings between person and person, wending their way to God. So these things are possible because of incomplete knowledge. So we will continue this topic in our next reading class. Today we shall stop here itself. Om Niranjanam Nityamanantarupam Bhaktanukampadhrita Vigraham Vai Ishavataram Parameshamidyam Tam Ramakrishnam Shirasa Namamaha. O Ram Krishna, the taintless one, the eternal one, the one with infinite forms, the one who has assumed a form for the sake of devotees, the incarnate supreme soul of, and the adorable Lord of all, we salute thee with our heads bowed down.